at them during the lunch break as well and the coffee break in the morning. We've looked at two aspects of the strategic research agenda and innovation agenda up to now. We have talked about priorities in the first round table. We've talked about how to jointly implement such agenda in the next table. Now we're moving to international cooperation, and we heard earlier, and we saw from Maurice's nice slides about the international nature of water issues, and also from the FAO about the links, obvious links between water and food. So to kick this last part off, we have Dominique Darmendrel, who is the current coordinator of the Water JPI, having taken over from collected the pass from Enrique in 2014. And Dominique, being a good rugby supporter, knows when she gets the ball how to run with it. And she will pass it in turn to somebody else in 2018. So if there's a volunteer in the room who wants to line up for that pass, you could tell Dominique about it. So Dominique is going to talk to us about JPI and international cooperation.
So, thank you, Porrick. So as you said, I'm the one who received the ball. So I'm the one less relaxed, who had the headaches. So I would like to quote the What in Tech project coordinator. We already sent this on Twitter. So it's my pleasure to be here and to introduce you what we are doing at the international level. First of all, I would like to start, by a quote. I think you should not, you should keep this in mind. It's from Benjamin Franklin, so it has 250 years. So you can read it. The last sentence says that in water there is bacteria. So I think that we have made some progress, and I think that is really linked to the cooperation at different levels, and in particular at the international level. So when the Water GPI started, that was what were the main objectives were there, and we had already some tools. And if you have a look, then in the third one was already to start international cooperation and try to have long-term partnership, memoranda of understanding with a couple of partners in the world. So as it was presenting this morning, we are at this stage 20 partners, full members from, I would say, a large Europe, and we have 4 observers. But you will see that, it seems that it's changing. Yes, fantastic. I don't know what happened. So 4 of them are already from outside the European Union. These 20 countries and agencies, plus are representing 88% of the public funding in the water area. So if you think that if we can work together, we have a high impact, if we can manage to have this transnational cooperation, but also to mobilize the national programs. The 4 of who are outside the European Union are, as you see, Israel, Moldova, Norway, and Turkey. Very different. But we have the common challenges. They are all part of the European Fair Trade Association, and they went, sorry, I will have to jump from one to one. They have been interesting almost since the beginning by this cooperation on the research. For trying to develop and identify where we would like to go, we did a bibliometric study for identify the existing cooperation between the European Union and the international, so the outside Europe countries. So we went to this bibliometric study for all type of countries. Finally, we decided to target, now it's not working, to 7 of them. So what they are, Brazil, Canada, China, India, South Africa, US, and Vietnam. And I'm quite pleased to let you know that at the round table you have 2 of them. So they are really interested to see where we are doing. Canada is already participating in one of our actions, one of the joint calls. This selection has been done based on the scientific excellence of the research communities and about development and market. You will see that at the moment we are thinking about a new strategy. We did a mapping on the RDI activities, where are the communities, where are the funding agencies, what are the existing programs in these countries. So all of this is available on our website. You go to in the International Cooperation webpage and you can find this information that we are sharing with all of you. We have been starting discussion with these countries with different levels of, I will say, success so far. But the good thing is that we have identified a couple of challenges for this cooperation. Though, if you have a look, then you can see the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and trends. I don't want to go back again on this. Sorry, I don't know what's happening with my slide. Can you manage that, Emmanuel? And I will ask you to change when it's necessary. Thank you. That's the technician at the back, the guy who is operating since this morning. Thank you. So the good thing is that in terms of trends, we have common challenges, and that's, I think, the most important. We have well-established cooperation, often with research networks. There's this very good connection there, and we have a lot of bilateral cooperation. The multilateral level, I will say, is not that far. On the other end, we are also trying to we have identified the most important, I would think, in terms of weaknesses, which is about the complexity of this cooperation. You have heard this during the previous roundtable that we had a couple of difficulties. We have tried to cope with them, but that is really important. We have different funding models. We have different evaluation system. We have different funding rates and eligibility that was raised during the previous. And you have heard several times before, since this morning, that we need a greater role of the end users and in particular the economic sector. In terms of threats, that was also raised several times. You heard about this fragmented, structure and the lack of information of what is done within the different partners, within the different countries, and so on. I also mentioned the fact that we are more used to bilateral cooperation. And jumping to the multilateral is not that easy. We are doing that at European level, but when you are broadening the scope, then you're also broadening the type of differences and even, I would say, cultural differences. We need, because the JPI is known, I would say, anytime I'm presenting it, it's saying, well, what is this animal? It's a very strange one. I remember the last discussion with our Brazilian colleagues by WebEx. It means that you need also time. You need the time to prepare, this cooperation. You need the time for joining some of these initiatives and actions. And as we are running also sometimes with EU money, it means that we have deadlines. And so we need to also to cope with these deadlines. And I think it was Stephanie who mentioned that you need to have a realistic timeline for building this international cooperation. I fully support this. In terms of opportunities, is that if we can do that together, then we can achieve a critical mass, a higher critical mass for achieving our societal challenges. And then we can also build and structure the RDI communities. The market opportunities have been also mentioned several times. And I think that it will be also the occasion to find new ways, new actions, new models of cooperation, which is also for us something quite important. The next one, please. Yes. So this is the list of the current joint actions that we have identified. And so far, you have heard about the, I will say, the two first. As a couple of people have mentioned, we are currently developing knowledge hubs, and that's something we would like to do. We are learning at the moment from FACE and from other initiatives, so it means that we would like to continue on that. I was discussing with a couple of people during the breaks about the infrastructure and observatories and so on. So how we can facilitate the access to this infrastructure, access to the information. I think it was also Stephanie mentioning that we can do some workshops together, try to, bring the different end users and work together to learn how to do that. Capacity building and training. So far, we didn't do much on that. And we are starting also to work on mobility scheme. Some of the project that has been funded under Waterworks 2014, so the call of last year, the kickoff was yesterday, and a couple of these projects are considering mobility in their project. Panos mentioned a couple of important Europe initiatives, but we are also discussing with the COST, which is an action working on networking of researchers, try to see how we can better bridge. Next one. Yes, so we also heard that the joint calls has been so far the most successful joint actions with the international countries. So that's the slide from Rosa. She mentioned, so under the first co-fund, so the last year call, we had South Africa on board, and they just joined the joint call. They put money there, and they have one project, I think. On the second call, the one which is currently under, I would say, evaluation of the step one, so the pre-proposal, we have 5. We could have 6, in fact, but we had some difficulties with US. Could not sign an H2020 contract, but you see that there are more and more interest. And if you show the topics, water and agriculture, even if it's not the most important in Germany, it's really important in these international countries. And anytime that we were presenting this topic, a lot of countries were interested. So it means that, you see, from 1 country to 5, they are participating in a call, but now they're also participating in some additional discussion we have on how to harmonize the procedure, how to have a common vision together, and how to work at the international level on a model for cooperation. So we will have activities with them in their country to try to see how we will cooperate together. We have also new opportunities, and we will come very soon to the Water JPI members, but also to the other JPIs about what we would like to do in the future joint actions. And I'm sure that we can find, if you can move to the next one, some opportunities of having topics. These are the 2. I don't know who mentioned that they wanted to have a long-term a plan for knowing where we would like to go, what are the topics for the future. So far, and if we can convince the member states and the Commission, we would like to have one on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, challenges. And you will see that as the all say this morning from the FAO mentioned, it's quite broad, so we will need to target where we want to go. But there are a couple of ideas coming from the first talks. And the next one will be on one of the themes of the 3-year, which is closing the water cycle gap. So it's about the sustainable management of water resources. But I must say that if you read carefully the 3-year, they are not only about the management of the water resources by itself, but there are a couple of keywords about water value, what is public good versus water services. The transboundary governance could be fall in this one. That's what I'm presenting is the water JPI actions. We are also promoting a couple of issues in the H2020 work program. So some of the things that have been presented before in the roundtable 1 or 2, like just take one, the water, energy, food nexus, is something that is written in the 3-year, but we are trying to get this in the work program H2020 for 18. So that will be one of our inputs on that part. Next one, please. So we are now also, Panos mentioned that this morning, we are waiting for the proposal we did on the new coordination action on international cooperation on water. We have there 17 countries involved. The WSSTP is also a partner, and we have received the support of 17 international institutions, of which some of them are also around will be around the round table. I think that will be important. And we will have two types of activity, one on the strategy. So we would like to define a real strategy for enlarging the water GPI network and the platform. We want to build also a public-private partnership. So that's where we're seeing also some opportunities to accelerate the implementation. And the knowledge hub will be developed. And then we will have also this call on UN SDGs. Just to next one, please. So this is where we went, 2013 when we started. Now we have a couple more countries. You have different colors. It means that they have different level of development of cooperation with us and with the European Union. They are sometimes eligible to EU funds. Sometimes they are not, which are creating some different challenges for us. I think this is really important, but this is just a cooperation with some countries. You have also what Maria Uccellatore this morning from the Italian Ministry of Research mentioned. We have Bonus, we have Prima with our regional initiatives, we have Afri-Alliance, we have Lipagri on Africa, but I could mention Piano, and the Chinese-European Water Partnership for China. There is also something on India, and so on. So that's, I think, the big challenges for us is how to, connect to all these initiatives and try to work together in a complementary way. Next one, please. Just to be sure. Hey. Hello. Yes, that's the only one to be on time. So thank you all. That's the situation now. You see, the water is blue. I'm not sure there is no bacteria in the fountain when I see all the people there, but nevertheless, thank you all.
Thank you, Dominique. Now we move to the third roundtable on the same topic, and we have people who have traveled a long way to be here. So we are very happy to welcome people from Brazil, from Canada, Tunisia, and I think the others are all European-based, but you're all equally welcome. It's going to be moderated by Mats. So Mats Svensson will now take the chair here. You have a bell, you see. You have a bell. I have a bell. What's your glass? All right.
So thank you very much. I'm going to moderate this one, and my name is Mats Svensson. I'm coming from the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, where I'm the head of the Research and Environmental Objectives unit. I'm going to lead this session here, which is then going to concentrate on our international collaboration, as you've been understanding. And I think that's very ambitious, and I think that we have international collaboration, but it also says something about water, because water is really an international issue also. So, and we also have the same kind of general changes in our climate and so on that we are all then facing. So therefore, international collaboration is also more forgiven also. There were also mentioned in this morning's session also, if you remember, that there are a lot to be learned about asset management between various countries then also in terms of infrastructure for water. But there are also other things that we can then share in common, none the least then kind of practice that we can develop further on, for example, to handle ecosystem services and also to how to weigh various kinds of interests and also from various stakeholder groups. But first of all, I would like to introduce the panel here also. So in short, you can just introduce yourself and say who you are and where you're coming from and what you're working with and so on. Please, have a go. We start from that side.
Hi everyone, I'm Anne-Marie Thompson from Canada. I'm with the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. So as Dominic has alluded, we've just joined this year the Waterworks 2015 initiative. So this is our an exciting opportunity for us to participate in a European Union-led initiative.
I am Francisco Barbosa from the Federal University of Minas Gerais, Southeast Brazil. And here I shall speak on behalf of the National Institute of, the Brazilian National Council of State Funding Agencies, CONFAP. I am a freshwater biologist.
Kalispera. I am Leonidas Antoniou. I'm coming from Cyprus, and I work for my funding agency of my country, the Recent Promotion Foundation. I am here as the new chair of the GPC.
I am Adir Rouma from Tunisia, Institution for Agriculture Research and Higher Education. So I have two hats. The first, I am associate professor, I am researcher, but in the same time, I am the director of the research program at IRISA. So I am here because I represent my funding agency. And I am very surprised by the number of the participation of these 25 projects submitted by the different institutions from Tunisia. Thank you.
My name is Bjørn Jensen. I am the Deputy Director General of the Danish Geological Survey. I'm active in various international water associations and also member of the program committee of the SC5 in Horizon 2020. But in fact, I'm here in my capacity as a member of the steering group of the China Euro Water Platform, where I'm heading the groundwater partnership. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and first of all, thanks for the invitation to be part of this panel. My name is Gaetano Casale. I'm the head of the liaison office of the UNESCO IHE Institute for Water Education. Just 1 second to explain that the UNESCO IHE Institute for Water Education is one of the 3 water pillars of the UNESCO water family. UNESCO IHE is one of them. Then we have the UNESCO IHP, the International Hydrological Program. And then we have the World Water Assessment Program based in Perugia. I'm also here with 2 hats because I'm also a leader of a working group in WSSTP. It used to be called the Working Group in International Cooperation, but then we realized that these meetings are already international cooperation, and we changed the name into Water Beyond Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Well, there are plenty of people here then also with 2 heads then also, so it makes it quite a good panel then also, of course. Then we have lots of knowledge and lots of heads here as well then. In the brochure of the program today, there was one question already raised also, which is then what I think we should start this session with then also. So I would like to again take on my right side then also and look at that question from your perspective then also from Canada then also. So please have a go on that question.
Yeah, so the situation in Canada is such that we know that our researchers are very well connected with international partners. The basis of our international collaboration so far has really been a more informal researcher-to-researcher collaboration. But we know that we do need to be more strategic in terms of partnerships, either on a specific topic that we would like to see addressed, and enabling our Canadian researchers to participate in larger network-type collaborations in the European Union and with other partners. NSERC, the funding agency, has just launched a new strategy, and one of the key objectives is called Going Global, and this is in recognition of the fact that we know that we need to be leveraging information. Canada produces about 4%, I think, of the scholarly literature, if you will, and so we know that while we have a very strong science and engineering community, there's still so much out there that we don't either have access to or that we're not aware of. And so this is really important, these types of collaborations. We are involved in some bilateral collaborations, which Dominique just alluded to as being perhaps a bit simpler. So we are involved in a number of those. Multilaterally, we're also involved in things like the Belmont Forum, things like the Human Frontiers Science Program. So again, trying to understand where our priorities are and where the best place to put our efforts are. And so in terms of the challenges, I guess for us that has been a challenge in terms of, I forget which speaker it was this morning, but kind of alluding to this idea of, are these international collaborations on a big scale, is this kind of an exception or a one-off thing, or is this really part of your national strategy? And for us, I think we're at a breaking point where we're wanting it to be more of a strategic investment than anything else.
Thank you very much. So, Francisco, your point of view here?
Well, in trying to prepare myself for this conference, I checked some of previous meetings, and I call attention, for instance, for the 11th COVAX colloquium held in Paris in 2014, which already called attention for 5 points. And I tried to bring some others, and because of course, time constraints, I will stick to 3 points for this first question. First, we have of course, there is a growing water demand, particularly in the agricultural sector. So we think that we have some actions that we should consider to enhance efficiency, as was said previously, of the use of water in agriculture. And just as an example, I'll bring some figure. For instance, reduce water consumption through new approaches on economic uses of water, to invest in drip irrigation or sub-irrigation instead of center pivot system. This would save up to 95% of water, according to different sources, and I use one, the USGS Water Science School. Water export, virtual water, must be incorporated in the final product's price. For instance, in the US, its number is one export in virtual water is 164 million cubic meters per year. In Brazil, Brazil is number 10th in this water exported, particularly with soybean. The second point, is to invest in water education at all levels and capacity building with a systemic and multi-transdisciplinary approaches. And the third point is to invest in assessment and guarantee free access to data banks to allow for precise evaluation of the water availability and water quality for distinct territories. Of course, I do not have the time to go specifically to all these points, but I'm just calling attention for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leonidas?
Well, first of all, I would like to clarify that I'm not an expert on the water theme, so I will mainly speak as a citizen. And I am personally an urban planner, so I will use both of my identities. In my opinion, the areas that we should focus for the international cooperation are mainly linked to the quality of life of citizens. And more especially if we take into account also the name of the JPI water that is linked to the changing world. I believe that there are two main aspects. The first one is related to the quality and the security of food and water. And the second one is related to the effects of the climate change, and especially those that are linked to the urban areas, because most of the population is living in urban areas. And I believe that on the level of international collaboration, we should not give so much emphasis on entrepreneur issues. I really agree with the approach of Panos this morning and the European Commission about the need to join the water issues with the industry, the related industry. But I believe that our role is also to give to people clean and safe water. We are in Rome, and you know that 3,000 years ago, the Romans, they had water in houses. And when I was a student in the university, in the first lessons about the evolution of cities, I was listening to my professor, Aravandinos in Athens, saying that the first step moving from the people who were living in the countryside to the civilized communities was the creation of water systems. And that was done 4,000 years ago in Knossos, in Crete, in Greece, Panos. So we are now talking 2,000 after Greece, and we have so big areas of the world who are clean and safe water is not an obvious. So my final point is that JPI Water, because I'm talking also as a governing board, as a member of the governing board, is that if we have two hands to stretch for international collaboration, then the one goes towards the countries that are developing research in a high level, as Canada, as US, as Australia, in order to create the background for our researchers to have the highest level of research results. And the second goes to the areas of the world, the less developed areas, where water is not there for each one of the citizens.
Thank you very much, Leonidas. Shall we also hear about the Tunisian perspective on this?
Thank you, Mats. In my speech, I will switch sometimes from the research to the director of the research program of the policymakers, because I am researcher since 15 years ago, and now I am in the other side. So I have the two types of hates, and I think it is very interesting to see how the collaboration, how the international collaboration is necessary for our country. First of all, I want just to give you this information. Tunisia had joined the H2020 in December 2015, and now it is considered as the same means are applicable for Tunisia and even for the European countries. That is very, very new, and I think Egypt with the Tunisia, the two countries that joined recently the H2020. So the first point, I will speak about the human resources in Tunisia. I know we have limited resources, but the human resources are very important, and they the strength of the country. Just to give you some ideas about this important and the importance of the human resources. We have 23 institutions of agricultural research in Tunisia under the umbrella of the IRISA. And IRISA is a semi-autonomous institute that's headed by the Ministry of Agriculture. the number of research, we have around 1,800 research, if we consider the faculties also as researchers. In the different levels and disciplines of science, we have more than 5,000 publications, and if divide the number of publications and the population, we are the first in the reef, the south of the Mediterranean. So I think we have a lot of human research, and I think we have very good scientists in different domains, in water and even in other domains. For the budget, the ISTE, it's Agriculture, Science and Technology Information, gives some very excellent indicators. ISTE is developed by the ISPRA, Institution of Food Policy and Research Institution, and we put in for the budget around $55 million. And this is, if we divide this budget to the GDP of agriculture, we find it's 0.64. As is not enough for the researcher. I think we need to put more money. And even this budget comes mainly from the government. I think it's about around 98% of the budget came from the government. As the director of the research program, I put a lot of money, and I have the green light from the Ministry of Finance to put money for the research. Before, there is some restriction, but after the revolution, we have the green light to put a lot of money for the research, mainly for innovation and mainly for the sector that are priorities. For the priorities, and I think that water resources are characterized by the scarcity in Tunisia. And Tunisia had developed a complex and diverse water infrastructure, allowing the country to mobilize and exploit available water resources. Also, in the country, we have set up a system and legislation and regulation to assure access to drinking to the majority of the urban and rural population, and to provide supplies for agriculture irrigation. And thus, I want to give you also another indication that 80% of water is used in agriculture. The majority of the water is used mainly in irrigation. The water demand now actually driven by the population increases, and improvement in living standards could reach its maximum around the year of 230. In order to face this challenge, I think the major orientation is to cooperate with our neighbors' countries in the framework of H2020, and we participate for the first time in Water JPI call 2015, and our participation is around 25 projects submitted in this call. So our orientation is to use the non-conventional water. As you have said, that 80% of water is used in agriculture, and it is good to go to the non-conventional water, mainly for the desalination. And the desalination, that there is a lot of innovative techniques that you can share it from European countries. Before we used the biofilm and the film for the desalination, and now there is new techniques and innovative techniques to desalinate water. Just I give you an example. The seawater greenhouse developed in Australia is very interesting, innovative technique that can be used in order to desalinate the water. There's a lot of innovative technique that can be used in order to use the non-conventional water. Also, the technology and innovation is important for the water efficiency and the using water in agriculture, mainly for irrigation. So this is the major orientation, and we would like to collaborate with with different European countries in order to exchange ideas, in order to exchange knowledge, in order also to build for the building capacity for the young researchers. And this is very interesting. For the second point, I think I consider this very important, is the valorization of the research results. As I have said to you, that we have a lot of publication and we have a lot of even patents, but the gap is how to valorize the research. We have the linear model actually, and the model linear for the valuation is not enough to valorize the research results. And we are thinking about the platform in innovation in order to put all the stakeholders, all the end users, the research together, and this will facilitate the transfer of the results to the end user. And I think with our collaboration, in the future collaboration with the European country and other countries, I think we will think about how to transfer the results to the end user using a new model like the platform of innovation. The third point that we would like to collaborate and how to fix the priorities. In the agenda, the version 2 of the agenda, we find 5 topics, and the priority sometimes is different from no European country to the country. How to conciliate between the priority at the level of no European country and for the European country. I think it's very interesting to extend the strategy in order to take into consideration the priority in the no European country. And the last point is the harmonization of the regulation. It is very interesting to collaborate, but sometimes we face some problem with the national regulation. And if you harmonize the national regulation with the international regulation, then it will be easy to collaborate with the European country. There's other points, but I want to stop here in order to leave the time to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. You also emphasize that water is not having any boundaries. I mean, if we're talking about desalinization, then we're also talking about salt water. So it makes it quite interesting also, where are the boundaries then for the water API then also. So to continue on then, Björn, do you want to talk about?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think I'll start with the first question, why we need international cooperation to meet the global challenges. I think it's a very good question, in fact, because it's not obvious to everybody that we should cooperate and have international partners. And with the focus on innovation, it doesn't get easier, but I can come back a little bit to that. I think this morning we were provided by Panos and others why we should have international cooperation, and I think a younger policy agenda, it tells everything, because Europe is now pursuing a double strategy of providing solutions also in the water business for solving its own problem, but also to introduce on the international market to create growth for the European businesses. So this is the double strategy to create jobs and so on and so forth. You all know that. And following that, we have a focus on innovation in, for instance, Horizon 2020. And should we cooperate with the Chinese on technologies which we want to sell to them afterwards? We haven't got mechanism for dealing with that contradictory notion. We have to find ways to do that. So it's not obvious. I remember back in the 90s when I was heavily involved in many European programs also, there was this notion of competition with the US and Southeast Asia. There's still competition. I think Dr. Löwe, he said it very good, very well this early on, but in Europe, but also in the world. So how do we cooperate? On what terms do we cooperate? We have to find mechanisms, we have to find ways to do that, to overcome also the embedded competition which we also face. So it is not obvious to everybody that we should cooperate. At least it should be solved how we should cooperate. And that's the first part of my question. The second part is that following this strategy, why we should have international cooperation also on the policy level, I think also all the young researchers in Europe and entrepreneurs in Europe, they have a global mindset. They want to invent technologies and solutions which they can sell on the international market. And what is then better than to cooperate with those who knows the challenges the best? So this is a very, very good argument for having this international cooperation, because that will create growth in the long run. But we still have the competition factor which we have to deal with. So that was part of That was the first part of my answer. I think maybe I'll save a little bit on which areas we should work on, so we can come back to that.
Thank you very much, Björn. And Gaetano?
Well, thanks. Well, I think I have the big challenge being the last one to gather the attention of the public. I would like to start with the remark that I thought that international cooperation in this conference would be more or less, apart from the FAO speech, confined to this panel. But especially since the start, I saw all the graphics that were shown by Maurice Herral about the global challenges. So we live, in fact, in a global society. I don't have to mention all the global challenges again because they were already mentioned. And as such, we cannot treat research, science, technology, and innovation with closed border within Europe because it doesn't make sense anymore. And by the way, I will add an input that is, I think, in a way complementary to what has been just mentioned here. And it's about, again, the Sustainable Development Goals. I was not expecting that the SDGs would be so much prominent in this conference, and I'm pleased to hear about that. Something that maybe has not been mentioned is the historical perspective about Sustainable Development Goals. SDGs are the legacy of MDGs. MDGs, as probably most of you know, they were just a small set of goals. This is now really exploded to a large number of goals. Now we have 17. They used to be, I think, 9 or 10. The MDG on water was just limited to the water and sanitation provision. So the focus was really just about drinking water and sanitation. The MDGs were not very ambitious because they had, let's say, a kind of percentage approach to reduce the number of people in the world by, that have safe drinking water to a certain amount. And the goal was reached, but what does it mean? That a lot of population still doesn't have access to safe drinking water. And that's why the SDG now, they have the universal access to safe drinking water and sanitation as a goal, because everyone is entitled, like we do every day when we open the tap, to have access to safe drinking water and sanitation, which, by the way, in many countries is now recognized as a human rights. But I'll get back to that. The other thing about SDGs, I think was rightfully mentioned by FAO, that the process, not only the output, we just read the outputs, we can read SDGs on the internet everywhere, but the process has been quite different. It was highlighted by the FAO person this morning. The process now, this is a member states driven. It means that it's really a global agreed upon agenda, which in my opinion should be taken also by these communities, the research and innovation communities, as an overall common guide. I would really like to recommend, to that extent, to have a look at the report, which I find very, very interesting. I'm not going to mention the details here. The follow-up to Rio Plus 20 expert group on the role of science, technology, innovation for the achievement of SDGs. It really makes a clear connection between research and innovation and the importance to achieve the SDGs. So I guess that closes my preliminary discussion about why international cooperation is important. Do I have the time to mention a few challenges?
Please.
Yes, very briefly. On the international scale, water security, I don't think I have to mention that. If you think that in countries like Africa, of course, more than India and China, they are already established economies, but Africa is really booming in terms of economic growth. Not only countries like South Africa or Nigeria, most recently Nigeria now has a GDP even higher than South Africa, I learned. And now in the graphs that you saw this morning, the water allocation in this country, the industry, for instance, is close to zero. But when these economies are booming, they may get closer to Germany case, where industry water use is maybe higher. So it's not only about food, not only about energy, but the water use in other less obvious and less mentioned use are important. And water security is a very important issue. Urban water challenges. A few years ago, we passed the threshold where cities and most of the inhabitants in this world, they live in cities. So the broad majority of people live in cities. And of course, in cities, there are very peculiar water challenges. The blue cities approach mentioned this morning by Leonardo was mentioned. But we also have other research lines and possibility of synergies, the concept of water-sensitive cities, the concept of sponge cities that was developed, I think, in China. It's also an interesting one, and the synergies between these different research, again, for urban agendas are quite important. The monitoring and big data. We mentioned SDGs. Of course, you realize how critical is the monitoring aspect to achieve, and it's not trivial at all. Even for the MDGs, I think many people highlighted the imperfection of monitoring whether the MDGs were achieved. So this monitoring aspect, in my opinion, is a science by itself. And it's maybe soft science, side of science, but it's an important part. And by the way, citizens were mentioned as beneficiaries, but citizen may be the source of science itself. The citizen observatory part of science. One thing that strikes me is that we have, let's say, I don't know, 60%, 50 or 60% of people having access to sanitation with all these goals, but we have virtually 100% access to smartphone everywhere without even having the need of goals. So, and these smartphones are a powerful tool to help citizens to work with the innovators and scientists to do something together. I stop it here because otherwise I'm going to take too much time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think, Björn, you were having a comment there also?
Yeah, well, I think I'll just follow up directly from you because I want to mention some of the challenges I see. It's quite short because I think you mentioned the most important ones. But I think that, from my perspective, one of the main problems in the world, at least in the international scene, is the water loss. Because it costs tremendous amount of resources. We use a lot of energy, a lot of resources to pump around water, and then we lose it afterwards. So it's water loss both on the supply sides in leakages from the water distribution networks, but it's also on the demand side. It's also in the industries, in agriculture and everywhere, because there are very few technologies, very few incentives to save and reuse water. So water loss is very, very important. It's turned around in the SDG 6.4 as water efficiency, but it's the same, it's two sides of the coin, in fact. And I think this is one of the main problems worldwide which we should deal with. And it's not focused so much in the things I saw in the screen just an hour ago. I think that should also put in focus. And the other thing you mentioned also was data management. I think that so many resources are wasted because we don't know how to store and how to share data, not in Europe and not in the world, but I think that should be put on the cooperative agenda because that will be a mutual benefit. Then we could learn it also because we have to learn others how to do it. So that was just two challenges which I think should be put on the agenda also. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for that comment, Björn. Now, so you're not falling asleep. I mean, I know it's late in the afternoon. All right, are you with me? Yeah. Raise your hand then. Raise both hands. Shake them. And now, think of one question that you will now relate to the topic that we've just been touching then also. Okay, it didn't help with the hands then. Okay. Please.
First a comment and then a question. The comment is the panel has very much been discussing the concept is that Europe has to go out and help the world to save their lack of water resources. And that's a very traditional way of thinking, and that's fine. One thing that's often forgotten is that collaboration with many of the countries some of you discuss, or developing countries I talk about now, maybe particularly China, but also others. There are very rapidly increasing research resources available in such countries. For instance, now you can go to any Chinese universities and you find chemistry laboratories much more advanced than any of us have. So there's an increasing capacity there where we benefit on the research infrastructure in particular maybe, but also access to students and so on. The question is, to solve the new SDGs, the key aspects to reach the goals are others than research. You need good governance, you need big investments, you need societal stability, and so on. So the question is, to be a bit tabloid, on a scale from 1 to 10, how important is research in this complex picture of reaching the new goals on water? Thank you.
Okay, anyone that feels tempted to answer on that very simple question? Okay, first, Francisco.
I would say 11 for a start, but I'd rise to 15, perhaps. And first, allow me to comment that when I see a collaboration for water, for instance, I don't see this direction that you call, or you point, saying that Europe should go and help the others. That's not the point. That is collaboration. There are different levels. And, but yes, at the same time, Europe perhaps must go and help some others if they have the expertise to do so. So, and that's why I said that research is 11. It's because we still need even basic research. And I'd like to call attention for the point that in the developing countries, for instance, the majority of them, they have very basic problems in terms of treating sewage, which is the water for tomorrow. And we have several examples in different countries and how this issue has been so neglected, including my country, Brazil. It's not a very strong economy anyway at the moment, for instance, but still we don't treat, as the country, we don't treat 40% of the sewage. And this is a shame. Definitely we should treat them. We have the expertise to do so, so why we don't that? And that's where Europe has to help us in explaining that we should perhaps move from the management level to water governance, which means several other issues. Thank you.
And Björn?
That depends how you define research. It is redefined in Europe right now. Research is not any longer research. Research is research and innovation. And I think if you say it's innovation or a little much innovation, I think there is a large need for that. There is a large need for technologies. For instance, I mentioned the water laws, the water efficiency area, but also in water quality area, the 6.1, and also in other areas. There's a lot of need for an innovation, new technologies, new types of solutions to solve those problems. So I think it's very high on the agenda, but I also agree with you, even though you didn't say directly that you cannot do it alone with innovation or research. You need governance aspects, you need capacity building. I think there's a lot of need for capacity building, and you need also in governance aspects, and you need investments, of course, in large scale. But research defined as research and innovation is still high on the agenda to solve some of those challenges addressed by the water code. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll just touch on your point quickly because it's interesting. So having just joined the Waterworks 2015, in Canada, we actually partnered with our International Development Research Council so that we do have 4 projects where there are participants from low and medium income countries, where that council would be able to fund them in collaborative projects. So we're hoping to see some good collaboration. It's still on the research front as opposed to maybe some of the issues that you were talking to, but it's a step in recognition of capacity building efforts that need to take place, joint research, extensive collaborations.
First, Leonidas, and then Francisco.
Well, a very challenging and difficult question, and I will avoid to answer it. But I will say that on behalf of the JPI Water now, if the JPI Water wants to, the JPIs were launched by the Council of Ministers in order to be the major players in their respective fields in Europe. And in my opinion, if JPI Water wants to have future on this role, it should elaborate itself to such a role, to be a major player in the water research field, not only in Europe, but also globally. So I would say that, yes, this is part of the role of the JPI Water, to serve the developing countries to find solutions about their specific problems, always related to water issues. If the JPI Water can manage to do that, then it will establish itself as the major player in the water research field globally. That's my opinion.
Francisco?
And perhaps another example of why we need research was raised this previously by Dr. Löw when he called attention for the needs in Germany specifically, but not only there, I'm sure, as we do need research for phosphorus recycling and as well as nitrate contamination in groundwater. We have to know how to do with this. And these are just examples that I took them as to say why we do need research. That's why I said 11 or perhaps 15 on your scale. Thank you.
Ali?
Just what I want to see for the collaboration. There is no something help others. In the research, there is a mutual collaboration, and we can capitalize excellent ideas and research experience in non-developing countries, in developing countries. Just I will give you my example. I have 4 patents, and the first time I will valorize my patent in Switzerland. You know, we can export our knowledge of the developing countries, non-developing countries, to the developing countries. Because sometimes it is very difficult to valorize your results in your country. And if you find an end user that will be very interested by your results, so you can valorize, we can export our ideas and to Europe. So I think for the collaboration, the mutual collaboration is not someone help the others. That's what I want to.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali. Gaetano?
It's a question with many questions inside. The main question was from 1 to 10, the importance of research for SDG. So I won't copy the 11, but I would say 10 cum laude, because it's extremely important, especially in this moment. And especially when we talk about innovation. We have understood the switch, the switch from Horizon 2020 perspective of having low technology readiness level kind of project into the ones that are close to the market, and those are the ones that can really make an impact. And then you were asking for an implicit question about cooperation models, and you're right, there is the usual mechanism of saying, okay, we have a very nice research result and we export that to abroad. It's not working anymore because a lot of institutions in many countries beyond Europe, not only the usual suspects like India and China, but many others are producing research that have very relevant scientific impact. So the mechanism, in my opinion, that should be adopted is not the one of knowledge transfer, but knowledge exchange through knowledge networks. It was mentioned before, knowledge hubs. Water JPI is trying to do that at a more international scale, even pushing it forward to knowledge co-creation, so creating knowledge with institutions that can work with you on solutions. And by the way, what kind of solutions? So science for what? I think, especially to achieve the SDGs, we need to identify the real demands and really what are the needs of the civil society, of the population, what are the needs that are going to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. That's also a role for the knowledge co-creation. And talking about capacity building, it was also mentioned, the traditional capacity building that we approach that we were using was, I would say, for the low technology readiness level. That's the usual kind of approach. But nowadays, we need also capacity building for innovation. So building innovation capacity. And by the way, this is not only, I think, a problem outside Europe. Even inside Europe, I still think we need to, let's say, increase our effort in building innovation capacity between all the different actors. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We have one more question then also that we should put to the panel, and I would like to start with you, Anne-Marie, and you also, I mean, happily you're here on the panel here also. Otherwise we will have a totally skewed gender issue here as well then also, so happy to have you here. The question is then, what are the kind of current barriers for collaboration, and what shall we collaborate about? Where to start?
Yeah, so I do have, sure. Oh, sorry, sure. So I do have some points on the barriers and what it means, you know, in deciding when to enter into a multilateral arrangement. And so certainly for us in Canada, especially at the granting agency, prioritizing, we're talking about global challenges, there's a number of them. How do you decide where you're going to put your limited funding, where you're going to get the biggest impact? So something as simple as just what are your priorities as a nation and making sure that there's good research capacity that will allow you to have the best leverage of the information that you can. The other thing that comes up, of course, is the idea of scale. So we recognize that to be able to have an impact and to be able to be real partners, there's an issue of scaled funding. And so this whole, there was another speaker who spoke to it about, you know, you can come with very limited funding, but if you want to be a true partner, you really have to have the investment, and that's probably a challenge for all of us. And then maybe the last thing I'll point to is, or maybe two last points. So for us in Canada, joining something like this kind of initiative, it is complex, I would say, as Dominic mentioned, trying to understand the, you know, the Horizon 2020, the co-funds, the aeronets, all this stuff is a bit foreign to us at this point, but we're getting there with much guidance. That's a smaller point. It just seems very complex, but that's fine. And then maybe just this idea of what a common definition of what success means for the countries involved, because everyone's coming with their own stake. But if there's some kind of common notion of what success is going to be, then and everyone understands that from the start, then I think that could be a very positive development.
Thank you very much for that. Cisco?
Yep. Well, I do put some different barriers, not only through the Brazil point of view, but barriers that I believe would apply to the majority of the countries and perhaps can be seen different ways in the different countries. I would call attention for the fact that water has different status or views. Is it a private or a public good? What I'm saying is that water has been treated through different policies worldwide, and this is indeed a barrier. The second point is the conflict that what I call mineral water versus natural water sector. Particularly in Brazil, this is one issue, but I believe it's not only the case of Brazil. The third is water. It's a market good or a priceless resource. This is quite tough and complex question. We had today different considerations concerning this point. The fourth is water and sewage, two sides of the same coin. I just said, how is the situation in Brazil? And recently, probably you've heard about the water crisis in São Paulo, the biggest city there, and it shouldn't be like that. The fifth is the lack of limited, consolidated, and I put in between brackets, democratic databases on water resources. We do have to consider these very carefully. The sixth is to invest in eco-technologies. The seventh, to invest in models for funding RDI in water research. And allow me just to go a bit more in detail on this seventh point. One important barrier faced by RDI cooperation is the lack of international funding arrangements to support the creation, consolidation of international research groups in this important topic. Initiatives such as Newton Fund from UK in particular, Horizon 2020 for the whole European Union are significant examples of alternatives which must be more explored for the benefit of tackling the water issues. CONFAPI, the organization that I represent in here, takes part in both. The availability of financial resources is essential, and these resources must support not only mobility costs, but also research costs in general, for what they must be granted by all interested parties. Thank you.
You're on this?
Well, I would like to approach the question on several levels. So the main barriers for me at the European level is what I call operational bureaucracy that is followed, that is needed to be followed in order to have an international collaboration. You have to prepare, the Commission should announce a call, then you have to prepare a CSA, you get the contract, all this operational bureaucracy that is needed in order to reach the goal of opening a collaboration. I would like also to mention some possible solutions for me. A new way to approach the whole spectrum of supporting joint programming and societal challenges in the new framework program. The second level is the level of the JPI. I think that at this level, the main barrier is that we don't succeed up to now to have integrated procedures. We act mainly as countries sitting around a table and not as a unit. On the levels of the countries, the main barrier for me is the lack of real commitment of the countries. In the theoretical approach and in the documents coming from the Council also, you always read statements from the countries that they support joint programming, they support water challenges and so on, but when the real commitment comes, the time for real commitment comes, then you realize that this, the ministerial level of commitment does not move towards the operational level. As far as the researchers level, that's the last one, I believe that the main barrier there is that the researchers are focusing on publishing papers rather than creating solutions and preparing that to be implemented in the real world. Another point that I think it's covering all the levels is the regulation issue. For some countries, it is impossible to, let's say, to move 1,000 euro from their budget to a common pot budget. And this is coming mainly from, not from the lack of the funds, but for the regulation problem that they faced. So, for me and for the future, because the question is also related to what we can do, I think that as a JPI Water initiative, we should plan our, we shall design our future plans having into consideration that international cooperation is a very important point of that. And so in our long-term strategies, we have to involve a specific part, a specific domain for international cooperation. And as far as the Commission is concerned, I think that there is a lot of room for improving since we are going towards the new framework program.
Thank you very much, Leonidas. Ali, what kind of obstacles do you see, and where should we start?
Three main obstacles for the international cooperation. First of all, the priorities, the topics. This is a very big problem because sometimes we are guided by the priorities in the calls, and the priorities are different, and sometimes completely different. And even I remember the Ministry of Agriculture that said to me that you work for the developing country because the priorities are set up in the call, and there is no interaction or connection between the different priorities, because as you know, it is different from one country to another. And sometimes a lot of research submit the proposal in order to be involved in consortium, but you work on the priority of European country, not for the priority of the national country. That's a very big problem for the research projects. The second is the national regulation. It's a very big problem. As we said, for the national regulation, we work in the consortium, and we fund, every country fund his team, but the problem, if you work in different national regulation, there is some difficulties, even for the for the meetings. You know that for example, just I will give you an example. For the per diem is different from the national at the national level than international level, and sometimes the research is very difficult to attend the meeting because of this. And I think we need to see this problem of the national regulation. I agree with my colleague for this. And the third is the valorization of the results. And I agree with my colleagues that all of the results of the projects are oriented for the publication. But we need a solution for the end user. And if I remember, and I have all the cooperation from Tunisia and the European countries, there is no one project that leads to a solution in the country. And this is a very big problem for the valorization of the results. And maybe the fourth, but it's included in the valorization, is the integration of the project. Sometimes we found the same project. There is a lot of collaboration, a lot of projects, European projects, bilateral collaboration, and sometimes, for example, in this DGP, I found that it's the same work that was founded before in a bilateral collaboration was founded in another project. So this is the problem of the fragmentation and the integration of the project. There is no database in order to see the projects that are founded before, in order to select the most important projects that were used for the country. This is a very, very big problem for us. I think that that's the main obstacles for the international collaboration.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. Björn?
Well, I think it's rather complicated. I'll try to simplify it a little bit because of time constraints, but I think at least there are two main obstacles or barriers for international cooperation. One is that we only should have the international cooperation where the issues we are dealing with take departure in their own problems. It sounds maybe a little bit awkward, but it is quite important that we should have such a, you mentioned that, a co-creative process. If we have real, for instance, bilateral cooperation or multilateral cooperation. For instance, in the China-Euro water platform, in the groundwater partnership, we spent quite a long time to define a program which took departure in the challenges seen from both sides, because this is very important. But it's not uncomplicated, because we thought maybe, for instance, pesticides in groundwater should be a problem in China. No, they didn't agree, and we had a lot of discussions about that. So it's not easy, but of course we should have this co-creative process before getting started, and that's one of the barriers, because we often do not have it. We just assume that we know what the challenges are, but we don't discuss it in depth. That's the first barrier, that we don't do that. The second barrier is, not to your surprise, not the funding, because we need funding. And I think you saw all the joint actions by the JPI in this international cooperation. You know, it always gets complicated with the funding when you have international cooperation, because all kind of funding schemes have to be developed, and they have to be different from country to country, and so on and so forth. And you spend a lot of time by that. I think that in the European program, we should have funding for the third-party partners. We should have funding for that. I know it's a bumpy road, because all the countries, they want their share and their bit of the cake. Yeah, I know that. So it's a bumpy road just to say now we allocate maybe 10% to international partners. But we have to do something different to overcome this barrier with the funding. The Ministry of Water Resources in China, they just made a program where you can get co-funding if you get funding, or if you get involved in a EU project, you could get co-funding for the Ministry of Water Resources. That's very good, but there's still a timing problem. So this funding problem is a major obstacle, and this is not a surprise, of course. It's much more complicated to solve the problem. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Gaetano?
Yes, thanks. Well, I take it from there. The funding, I'll cover the funding later. I can't speak, I must say, on the government-to-government cooperation, so because, of course, I'm not involved in those. As an observer, I think that policy fragmentation is still an issue, and it's connected to funding, in fact. So, for example, European Commission, international cooperation, environment, development cooperation, and research. But within the European Commission, my observation, and again, it's my observation, is that there is a process of converging of these different mechanisms. So it's not anymore a silo kind of system. And in fact, it was mentioned this morning by Panos that 60% of Horizon 2020 is going to be earmarked for sustainable development goals, which traditionally is more of a development cooperation kind of mechanism. So, but I would like to extend this issue to a more international basis, because now we are talking about European Commission. We are here in a community which is closely connected to the EIP waters, to the WSSTPs, to the European Water Platform. Beyond that, on water, there are other agendas, and not so much in Europe, but at an international scale. I know that because I made an analysis that in countries like Africa or Asia, the agendas that really matter are less technological, less research, but more development cooperation kind. In fact, our alumni community never mention to us in this survey that we made, oh, we have a water platform in the sub-Saharan Africa and we identify a research agenda there. There are, of course, the agendas of isolated institutions, but the ones that they always mention from a water sector professional perspective are the ones from UN institution, from the World Bank, from International Water Management Institute, CGIAR, all these agencies that deal just with development. So we had to find a kind of convergence between these different, and of course this is not a trivial exercise, I realize that. I have something that I would like to mention. It may sound a little bit of a trivial issue, but it's an issue of a common dictionary, common vocabulary, common grammar about water. I have here some words that I noted down that were mentioned quite much in this conference and many other conferences in Europe: market, economic value of water, business, private sector. I'm very sure if you go to some of the conferences about water in Africa or in other regions, they would really not appreciate such an extensive use of these words. I'm not making a judgment here. I'm just making an observation. In Delft, last month, we had the launch of the World Water Development Report, the 2016 edition. Water and jobs, by the way, it's very important because it makes a clear connection how much water is important for job creation. And in the panel, we had a UNESCO representative for the World Water Assessment Program, a Unilever person, a professor from my institute, a person from OECD. And now you can imagine that these words were also mentioned, especially by the OECD and the Unilever person, but also by the UNESCO person, because we all realize the value of water aspect. There was a comment from the audience, from I think it was an African ambassador, saying, "Why are you saying these words? Water is a human right." So it was really like we were discussing something outrageous. So I think it's really important that we tune up and we are really, let's say, humble in explaining why we use so much these words, and we should listen also the other perspective. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gaetano. Now we are running out of time, but I will allow one short question to the panel here of utmost importance.
Is a question to Gaetano. In international cooperation, how you see from institutional capacity building for water science diplomacy?
Is that a question specifically on water diplomacy? Yeah, it's a very broad question. I must say that international cooperation, partnership, creation of networks is really the DNA of our organization. So we are a strong believer that without partnership, without tackling all the different spectrum of water challenges, and now you just mentioned water diplomacy, which has not been mentioned yet, I think, in this conference. It's quite important and cannot be done, let's say, in like the person was asking, the traditional way. So partnership and new models of cooperation that take into account the co-creation aspect. On water diplomacy, transboundary conflicts are still quite relevant issues in developing countries, and it's a huge discussion. In the EU-India cooperation, the Ganga, for example, is very high on the agenda, and I think the aspect of issues of transboundary cooperation there, as well as in other basins, I shouldn't mention the Mekong, the Nile Basin, etc., are very important. And we realize that science diplomacy is very important to address these kind of issues. I am very grateful you mentioned that, because those are the kind of topics that normally are not covered, is the soft side of water management. So water conflict, the potential conflict to cooperation potentials, the program that we have with the UNESCO IHP is also another important topic. Yeah, so that's something that should not be neglected. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Gaetano. I think we have to close this session here now also, even though we are coming into interesting new parts. I would like to give you applause for the panel here, first of all. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, the audience also for listening, and very interesting questions then also. Thank you.
You can all stay there if you want to. I just have to wrap up this conference in the absence of Maurice. He has asked me to just say some closing remarks and maybe just to summarize briefly what we've heard today. I suppose it's the first JPI Water Conference. I think it has been a huge success, and I hope you think the same too. I certainly was very impressed with the quality of the presentations, the quality of the interaction with the audience, and you certainly deserve to give yourselves a round of applause, so I'd ask you to do that now. After the sort of welcomes from the important people from ISPRA and the ministries here, Maurice, who unfortunately had to leave, gave us some really interesting slides on the global issue of water. And you know, people talk about when we run out of oil, when we're going to run out of fossil fuels, but in fact, as he showed, we'll run out of water long before that. And I think we can all manage without fossil fuels. Maybe we mightn't be as mobile, we mightn't be as warm in our homes, but we won't last long without water. So it's hugely important. The FAO man also made a nice link with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and that came up again and again in the topic and in the topics that today, and showed the importance of international cooperation. Just briefly, I took some notes, and Louise, I looked at her notes, and others, just as the roundtable discussions were going, and just a few things that stuck out very briefly. I just underlined them, and the difficulty is that when you type a lot now, you know, your handwriting goes to hell, so I can barely read my own handwriting, but things I have noted that's important is that water matters. I circled that, and maybe the awareness of it among policymakers and among the general public is not as high as it should be. So water matters. I gather that there's lots of opportunity for cooperation between the different JPIs, the urban, the other one, the NR, and FATCHE, and others, and climate. So there's opportunities there. We have to manage the assets. We have a very, very big asset in our water infrastructure. Think about it. In your home, you turn on the tap, but there's a lot of work to get the water to your tap in the kitchen or to flush your toilet, and then to take away the waste and treat it. And it's something that needs to be managed big time. I was happy that Antonio noted the difficulty in linking the chemical status and the good ecological status of under the Water Framework Directive. That's 15 years old, and it's still a problem. In Europe, 40% of rivers are not yet classified, which is something terrible, really, when you think about it. There was a mention of refugees, and that was in Morris's presentation about how water and food is driving that to a large extent. And the question of markets for water came up, and of course, we see people all the time, especially in Ireland, where we have a lot of Eastern Europeans. I see them leaving the supermarket with massive bottles of water, even though our water is perfectly safe to drink, and at the moment it's still free in Ireland. We don't even charge for it, but it has brought down the government almost, and is causing a lot of political problems. In Eastern Europe as well, we heard that they're spending more on bottled water now than they are on their entire infrastructure and utilities for that. In the second roundtable, I sort of highlighted things like the need to continuously reevaluate your tools because it's a changing world. And I thought Don gave us a very good example there just of the higher temperatures of the air and all of the knock-on effects from a scientific point of view that entails, you know, with all the things that happen in the water side. And that's only one aspect. And we all know climate change is here, it's happening. And that's a whole other debate. But I mean, the scenarios that you look at, we're still heading for one of the worst scenarios. And I think it's going to be mediated, or we're going to feel it through water, whether it's floods and droughts, extreme events, or worse. from Panis, I got the idea that there's still some work to be done at the EC level to get complementarity between all the different things that's happening. And I think that's important for the water JPI as well. There was some talk earlier of some kind of a long-term funding, and that seems to die the death. And now there are other regional initiatives happening. And I'm relatively new to this, and I think it's a very crowded field. I get that feeling that there's a lot of things happening, and certainly there's opportunities there for complementarity. I think the idea of doing a state-of-the-art about water in the same way that the IPCC can do a state-of-the-art about climate was a very, very good idea. And continuously through the presentations, I got the impression of the need to transfer knowledge into action, innovation or whatever, to valorize it, if that's a word, and to move it to the innovation stage and then to the final stage. I was interested in Helmut's contribution about the European water industry and the fact that they're all national and they're all competing, and that's an important point to remember. And also that the water JPI is not a call machine. We never intended to be. We do not want to be, and we have to learn how to do knowledge hubs. And I know that that's work that's ongoing in Sweden, and to become centres of excellence as well, or to create centres of excellence. I felt that there was the genesis of a knowledge hub happening yesterday when these people with similar experience were in the room together. I was delighted that the GWRC can cooperate. I think it's good, and also the Urban Europe can cooperate there. I'm almost finished. I think involving stakeholders, it's difficult sometimes, and the length of time it takes from research into positive action, like 10, 20 years as mentioned, that's a long, long time for anybody who wants to make an investment. The researchers, I was happy to say, seemed to think that our existing format was good and was easier than competing funders. The Canadian experience, where they need to prioritise and need to decide to be more strategic, I think is important as well. And Brazil made the point about enhanced efficiency in water use in agriculture and the need for education and access to data. I think that's important. And indeed, we talked earlier about open data and the need for standards there. So there's 2 or 3 more takeaway points. One is Leo's talk about the Greeks 4,000 years ago. Think about it for a second. They had sanitation. We have probably billions of people who still don't have it 4,000 years later, which really is incredible when you think about it. I looked up on my phone there just the WHO statistics. 2.2 million people die from diarrhea every year. Most of it is waterborne, and most of those are children. So that's worth thinking about. Finally, we live in a global society. I thought the last couple of contributions were very telling. You need to be careful about your grammar. Water is a human right, and we just have to be careful about the language you use. So, in those quick summaries, and I know it was quick, I want to finish by thanking everybody. Thanking, first of all, our hosts, ISPRA. They have done a wonderful job. It's a beautiful venue, and they looked after us very well for the last few days. Some people are here for 4 days. Most of you are here for 2 days, or just today. But I think, first of all, I think they deserve a round of applause, Elena especially, and Josephine and all the others. So well done. I want to thank Manuel in there in the box. Well done, Manuel. Man, am I getting it right? Yes, well done, Manuel. I suppose the caterer also deserves applause, and thanks for that. I want particularly to thank the speakers, because the speakers had to, it's easy to say, yes, I will speak at that, and that's months away, and then suddenly, it's a week away, and you haven't made the PowerPoints, and you have to get down and do what you have to organise a plane trip. I'm well aware of that, and the work that goes into it. Then you get up and you give your 15 minutes, and it's all over. But you have put a lot of work and effort into that, so thank you very much to that. And finally, thank you to the audience who have been wonderful and have stayed the course to the bitter end. I'm just checking my phone, and it's exactly 6 o'clock. So thank you all very much, and safe home.